it became clear that the only way for us to actually be true to our mission is to pursue this radical change path and to bring Skip in.
When you're building an ecosystem, you have to build the whole thing, right? You have to build the go-to-market. You have to build the technology. You have to build the narrative. You have to build the community. You have to build the hub and the chain and the center point where like culture happens. All of those things need to be coordinated. If you believe in multiple blockchains and not just one blockchain, which is ultimately the huge difference between Cosmos and everywhere else, if you believe in many and you believe in a world where there is a lot more differentiated architecture and sovereignty, this is the time to sort of be invested because now we have no restrictions.
Hey, I'm here with Josh Cincinnati, president of the Interchain Foundation Council, and Magnus Marinak, returning guest on the show, who's the co-founder of Skip, which has now been renamed to Interchain Labs. And today we're going to be talking about the news that came out about a week ago, 10 days ago or something like that, that Skip had been acquired by the ICF, and all of the changes that is sort of leading us towards in terms of a new direction and alignment in the Cosmos ecosystem. There's been lots of reactions about this announcement, and we're going to dive into all the aspects of this and what it means for Cosmos, what it means for the Interchain as a whole. And we'll get started right now. So, guys, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
So my first question is how has the community reacted? What has been your sense of the reactions across the community from this announcement?
I think it's been really positive. I don't view myself as separate from the community because, as of a couple weeks ago, I was at Skip, which I consider to be part of the Boulder community of Cosmos. And one of the things that I wanted that I think the community reflected as well is real leadership at the ICF and at the level of, a foundation to sort of really drive Cosmos forward. That is something that we've accomplished, right? And I think that was, at the end of the day, that is something the community really responded well to. I think also, one of the things that we've always tried to lead with is, humility and a real product focus. And that is something that I think was missing before in Cosmos, is really thinking about Cosmos holistically with the hub, with the stack, with everything, and driving that forward as a product with a go-to-market. And I think language around that, make the hub a hub, right? And, combine everything, unify everything all as one is really important to sort of get the community on the same page. But I've been thrilled with the response.
Yeah, co-sign all of that. Seeing the response has been amazing, especially given. So I joined the ICF board, also known as the Foundation Council, in December of last year. And I will say for the vast majority of my tenure, I have not really seen that kind of community response. It's generally been more of the opposite at the ICF, which is something that I took to heart quite a bit, even though a lot of the things that happened over the last year, they were sort of necessary for us as the ICF to figure out how we were going to move forward. And I think to Mag's point, one of the things that was really powerful, I think, for us at the ICF was listening to the community and understanding and being reflective about the things that we don't have at the Interchain Foundation, including really on the ground, builder focused, empathy and leadership. And that was something that, immediately made this deal compelling to me, was, sort of understanding, oh, well, there's a lot that we're missing here at the foundation. We should understand that we can fix this, but it's going to involve a really radical shift in how we operate and where we place our, where we kind of place our bets on the teams that we want, building going forward.
Yeah, and you even said this in your in this X post. You kind of acknowledged that the ICF has not had the best reputation in the space. That Skip has this sort of very very good reputation and amongst builders and amongst the community. As someone who's been like watching the ICF for a long time and like been in Cosmos for a long time and have had relationships with the ICF for a long time, I also did feel like the ICF wasn't getting credit for where credit was due, but at the same time was seen by the community and perhaps with some amount of reality, right, that it was a bit dysfunctional and that like sort of the community had for a long time been hoping that that the ICF would take like really a substantial role in directing the tech, directing the hub. With that in mind, how did this deal come together? What was the tipping point where folks at the ICF and at the council thought, okay, like we really need to correct this situation and take really strong leadership on the hub, on the Cosmos ecosystem, the stack as a whole, so that we can perhaps compete with other ecosystems, or at least be a viable place for developers to want to build applications.
Yeah. I can definitely take that from the ICF council side, and then I'll hand it over to Mag to talk about it from the Skip perspective. But what I would say is, so if you had followed the last year of earlier ICF drama, I became president of the ICF, the Interchain Foundation Council, in June. Was not what I was expecting to happen, but that did happen. And as a result, from there, myself, Maxime, and Ethan Buckman, who were still on the Foundation Council at that point, ended up going through a lot of reflection about how we wanted to organize the ICF, and kind of in tandem with that, Ethan had reached out to the folks at Skip to talk about the prospect of them taking over the hub, and they rightfully, I think, said there's no way that we'd ever do that unless we were in a more central role for the hub and the stack, because they view them as like kind of indispensably linked together. And after that discussion, I ended up having some conversations with Barry that made it kind of opened my eyes to the opportunity, and then got me thinking about the path that the ICF was currently on versus this other possible path of an acquisition. Because we had like two roads ahead of us. One road was we keep the model of core technology development as we have with all these core teams working. We iterate and improve on governance and management at the ICF, and sort of do a more gradual transformation. And that was one road, right? And then the other road was effectively this model isn't working. We need to radically realign how we develop the tech and our relationship with the hub, or what we hope to be our relationship with the hub. And that was the path ahead of us in Skip. And to be honest, like after thinking about those two paths, it became clear to me, as a Foundation Council member, the former path of that very gradual iterative improvement, would it have worked for the organization? Probably, but it would have taken 2 or 3 years, and by then, the entire it would be irrelevant, because other ecosystems would have won, and they would have won in a way that, most importantly and most sadly to me, would have effectively jeopardized everyone's ability to have a self-sovereign financial system, because that's to me what is important about the Cosmos vision, and that's unique here compared to anywhere else. So I didn't, I viewed that as a failure path at that point. And once I kind of, in my view and in the other Foundation Council members' views, after we discussed it, it became clear that the only way for us to actually be true to our mission is to pursue this radical change path and to bring Skip.
Yeah, that was super well said. I mean, I could add a couple things on, going back to the time when I first had this conversation with Ethan, where, he came into the office and he basically said, would you do product and maintenance for the hub? And he said, no, there's no way we're going to do that unless you let the ratings do all of it, right? Because you can't just do one of these things in isolation. And that's something that I really believe from a product perspective is when you're building an ecosystem, you have to build the whole thing, right? You have to build the go-to-market. You have to build the technology. You have to build the narrative. You have to build the community. You have to build the hub and the chain and the center point where culture happens. And you have to build the vision. And all of those things need to be coordinated, right? And that's just, I think, how you run a successful company is you have one North Star that you're all moving towards, and everything is coordinated along the way, right? You don't have things sort of just developing on the sides. And I think one of the most pleasant surprises I've ever had in Cosmos was talking to the ICF and realizing that they had the same opinion, right? And that they believed us, that we could, unify it and really drive it forward towards this one vision of growing Cosmos massively. And so we're here to do that. I think some of these things are very, very familiar to me and Barry in terms of, of course, the technology stack, the story around the interop platform, with Skip Go, we're very familiar with that. With the hub itself, it's a code base that we can easily understand and easily start to work on. And then some things are new for us, right? Like building a real go-to-market, right? When it comes to attracting new builders into the ecosystem. That is something that we're building up the capabilities to do. But I think the important part and what we're bringing is we have a real dedication to making all those things work well. And I don't believe one is more important than another. So I, really appreciate the ICF sort of acknowledging that and excited to work together towards that.
You both talked about this radical shift. So, explain what is this radical shift like? So, what is going to happen in the next, say, 6 months to a year? What's the roadmap in terms of the product? The product that is, and forgive me if I'm missing some pieces here, but I think the product includes the Cosmos SDK, IBC, some lower parts of the stack like Comet BFT, etc. But also the hub, right? The hub is a very important part of the product, and I think for a long time has been sort of separated from the stack somehow, and a lot of folks felt like that needed to be separate, and the stack was a standalone thing. So how is that radical shift going to affect all these different parts? And forgive me if I missed some parts, but yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit of that. So Cosmos is, I would argue, basically a top 3 ecosystem in hiding. It has been before. It will be again. And it's a question of, it has been multiple times, and it will be again. I truly believe this. And the reason for that is because it is correct. It's not the right narrative necessarily right now. It's not that it has the best branding or anything like that. It just is the correct architecture. And it is the architecture that everyone else, every other ecosystem, no matter what stage they are, will end with. And we've already seen that happen, right? We've seen that happen with Ethereum. We've seen that happen with, even the Solana roadmap now with network extensions. We've seen that happen with Bitcoin and the L2 expansion. And we will continue to see that happen. We've seen it with Celestia and sort of sovereign rollups. This model of increased developer sovereignty over the choices they make for their application will only accelerate, because that is how development works. Is you want to, continue to modify, customize, and own the economics and developer environment that you're building in, right, to best serve your application. And so it's nice to be working on the right side of history, right? That is what I believe, is that we are now able to accelerate the vision that will ultimately win. And I believe that truly. So how do we get there, right? How do we get from where we are right now to where the right architecture should be, right? And where the right ecosystem, the right vision should be? I think the first thing is addressing the realities of how both retail and developers think about a crypto ecosystem, right? Because it's not just a tech stack at the end of the day. It's really an ecosystem, which is its own living and breathing entity that has people in it, that has things getting minted, that has, assets transferring. It's an economy, right? The primary thing that we need to do in Cosmos, and the primary thing that I'm going to be focused on, is growing the liquidity within the Cosmos ecosystem. So that means getting more money, whether that be by unlocking staked capital in Cosmos, or by bridging in external capital from other ecosystems, or onboarding new capital from onboarding and off-ramps, or on-ramps and off-ramps. All of that stuff matters because we need to get more money moving in the ecosystem, because money attracts developers, right? That's just the reality of how it works. And there are a couple things that I think are really important to help make that happen. The first one is recognizing that the greatest asset of Cosmos is the Cosmos hub itself. It is one of the very first proof of stake blockchains. It is extremely secure. It has a long history and tenure and distribution among some of the oldest funds and family offices. It has huge brand equity. It is something that is very attractive when framed the right way to bring in large amounts of liquidity and to park a lot of liquidity. And so we tend to sort of leverage the Cosmos hub to be a real hub. So that means a hub of where people can onboard assets to by making sure it's even more secure than it is today. And that means things like, of course, like auditing the software, removing the LSM, which has concerns over its security, replacing it with something better. It also means, making sure that we're doing a comprehensive, evaluation of things like, P2P storms, which has been brought up in the past, and like other potential security issues that could have affected the hub. It also means, though, becoming a developer hub, right? And so as part of that plan, we plan to speed the hub up, which has not affected security properties, to under 2 seconds. So we'll have block times that are actually very fast and competitive. And then launching a way to permissionlessly deploy on the hub without affecting its core security, right? So right now, one of the best assets we have in Cosmos is CosmWasm. It is a natively built for the Cosmos stack VM that is excellent, built in Rust, one of the most secure and type-safe languages. And we can deploy that on the Cosmos hub. There's nothing stopping us. That will enable builders who get excited about Cosmos and the vision to have a very fast way to tap into the heart of it, which is the Cosmos hub and all the liquidity that is going to be moving there. And what you get out of that is a flywheel, right? It's easy to deploy in the Cosmos hub, so people do it. Deployments and new applications attract new capital, and then that capital will attract more developers, right? And it's just a cycle, and you see that cycle playing out in Solana. I think the key for Cosmos is there's no lock-in, right? So when you develop, and if you deploy as a smart contract, the intended path for you is to become sovereign, right? And still maintain a relationship with the Cosmos hub, but to be your own full sovereign native L1 architecture versus being this like lock-in into one ecosystem, or sort of like this alignment lock-in. And that, I think, is where we differentiate in terms of like our overall architectural plans versus every other ecosystem.
Very cool. I wanted to maybe kind of dive into each of those different aspects, and particularly the one that I'm quite curious about is like attracting liquidity. I think you're right that a lot of that Atom is a very distributed asset amongst family offices, funds, etc. It has been around for since 2019. With like ICO participants in 2017. It's not a dinosaur asset yet, but it has long standing. How do you intend to say like increase the amount of liquidity in Cosmos by an order of magnitude, or maybe 2 orders of magnitude, so that we can compete with these top assets like Solana, like Bitcoin, like ETH? What's the unlock to bringing in that liquidity and making Cosmos an attractive place to, say, park liquidity?
Yeah. So when you're talking about orders of magnitude liquidity increases, really what you're talking about are institutional investors, right? To some degree, you can talk about retail investors, but retail investors at the end of the day are attracted by very different things than institutional investors. And the things that retail investors are attracted by are usually quite ephemeral. There are things like temporary yield differentials, right? A farming campaign, like liquidity mining, things like that. When you're talking about institutions who can deploy $50 to $100 to $200 million clips of liquidity into your ecosystem, they are concerned about a couple things. One is security, right? Are their funds going to be safe? Right? Are they going to have to worry about this and explain to their investors that they're putting money in a place that is not safe? Like, it sounds simple. And, to developers in the community today, that might sound like something that, like, okay, we've already solved that. We haven't, right? We need a story for how the hub, which is the most secure chain in Cosmos, can become basically a custody provider to then deploy liquidity safely into the rest of the ecosystem. That's the first thing is security. The second thing is making sure that institutions who are not crypto native often, right, and do not have extreme technical backgrounds can understand the architecture and understand the vision of why Cosmos is superior to every other design and ecosystem, right, from a long-term perspective, because they are investing just like we are in a vision. Right, a vision for a future ecosystem. And I think what we need to do there is really define and refine the kind of pitch that we're giving to those institutions and make it clear to them how it makes sense from an architectural standpoint so that it can click in their mind and say, okay, well, this is actually a real opportunity to invest in something that makes sense, right? And like will scale much better, and it will scale much better than every other, ecosystem is designed.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna and to add to that, it's a multidimensional problem, right? And I think Mag's right that getting that institutional unlock is going to enable those the much bigger impact in terms of increasing liquidity. But the other thing that you need to have as well is basically everything that Mag was talking about in his prior response, which is building overall utility and features and flexibility into the hub itself, because that's what then begets, once those institutions have more capital deployed and they see, oh well, there are these other things that can be done with the hub, that unlocks even more opportunities, and it unlocks it not just for the hub, but for everyone in the ecosystem that's connected to the hub, right?
Right. It's a flywheel. I mean, I guess this is what you're saying is like, you need the products, you need the what attracts the liquidity in order for institutions to kind of want to put their liquidity there. So do you anticipate sort of reaching out to like and engaging with institutions who already hold Atom? You were thinking of like, the polychains, the KR1s, et cetera, that, are sort of early in Cosmos that probably have pretty big Atom bags, run validators for some, and getting them more engaged with their own Atom liquidity. And then later on, perhaps like having a more targeted campaign to family offices, institutional funds, VCs, et cetera, hedge funds that don't hold Atom, that could be interested by what the hub has to offer?
Absolutely. Yeah. Both. So we've already been engaging with, institutions that hold Atom, and talking through their concerns. I think one of the nice things that we've heard back is for the first time ever, they feel like they have a team that they can discuss the roadmap with, right? And give feedback on it. I think that's really important if you're to put millions of dollars into a product and a protocol and a vision, you want to know who's working on it, right? And like who can make decisions and who can take feedback. right, and make sure that their concerns are addressed. The plan for larger institutions, I think, is sort of twofold. The first one is talking to existing family offices and institutions that are considering asset purchases, and basically making sure that they understand the Cosmos vision and they understand why it is secure. And that requires us making a much tighter version of the ecosystem story that they can understand. For example, right, if you were to try to pitch Cosmos to an institution today, and you were to say, this is Cosmos, and this is the Cosmos Hub, and they said, oh, great, well, what does the Cosmos Hub do? And then you explain, oh, it's just another chain, right? And it don't worry about it, right? It's actually all these chains together. Right now, you're asking them to evaluate every single chain individually and make a assessment about the security properties of each one. That is not what they have time to do, right? When they think about Ethereum, the first thing they want to do is invest in ETH. If that goes well and they feel secure, then they will look at all the other chains and all the other rollups, and they will make investments as they have with L2s and things like that. That we need to replicate that story with investors in Cosmos, where we can at least assure them guarantees or security properties of one thing, get them to invest in and be part of the vision and see why that's relevant. And then I think they are much more willing to expand outwards into the rest of it. That is generally how I've seen institutions operate so far.
Interesting. And one other thing you mentioned earlier was removing the LSM. Can you share your views on why we should remove it, and if we were to replace it with what? And because I realize that there are like these security issues with the LSM, but I think that in terms of getting access to liquid stake Atom, it's actually one of the better features that the hub has compared to some other chains. So yeah, curious to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So the LSM, I believe, is a good product, at least in its intention, which was to essentially allow for very seamless transfer of staked Atom into liquid staking protocols. Liquid staking in general is great because you can preserve liquidity in the ecosystem while preserving the majority of the staking reward. But the main product of the LSM was taking staked Atom, not having to wait 21 days, and putting it into either ST Atom or Drop Atom, right, or any other liquid staking protocols that exist. We want to replicate that functionality because that makes sense. And so the primary reason for removing the LSM is not because it was a flawed product by design, but because and I don't need to say this again, but basically having it be built by questionable developers and being a core piece of Hub software is not acceptable. And so, very soon next year, we are going to immediately remove it from the next upgrade of the Cosmos Hub proposal and replace it with a rebuilt, internally audited and externally audited version that has just that same functionality, but a different design. This will also serve a purpose of removing a lot of legacy code out of the hub, enabling us to move faster and maintain the chain much better and to a higher standard, because then we can upgrade all the versions to the most recent ones, which the LSM in its current form is preventing us from doing.
Okay, understood. I didn't realize there was this other technical debt attached with the LSM. Interesting. Maybe talking about again, the hub and Atom as an asset. How do you there has been a lot of, I think, opposing views in this space about the hub's role. It feels like over the last couple of years, at least, the hub has been kind of taken a back seat to other chains in the ecosystem. And I think people have sort of discounted the hub as just another chain in the ecosystem. Like the hub is no different or like doesn't have any sort of superior standing as any other chain in the ecosystem. It's just like part of the Cosmos chains. And I think that was probably in part due to the product being a little bit underwhelming, and the development of the hub, and also maybe the drama. Where do you think the hub needs to be in a year from now? And like, does it need to have a sort of like this kind of, does it need to really reclaim its title as a hub? And how will that help the ecosystem as a whole, not just interchain security chains, like replicated security chains that are secured by the hub itself, but, you know, all the chains in the ecosystem, whether that's Osmosis, Celestia, or Berachain, or Injective, or any other IBC connected chain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that the reality, which is tough to swallow and was originally tough for us to swallow, is that the hub already has a title, right? And if you talk to retail investors or institutional investors, they think the Cosmos Hub is the Cosmos Hub, right? Because it's called the Cosmos Hub and because it was the first chain launched on Cosmos, and that's what they know, right? It has 5 years of brand equity that is very hard to erase. It's almost impossible to erase. So I think it's less about proving to people that it is the hub for Cosmos. People already think it is. It's about living up to that title and servicing the ecosystem as though it was the Cosmos Hub, right? And so what that means is actually investing funds and providing liquidity to grow the ecosystem in a very direct way. What it means is, providing, aggregated vendor relationships so that, for example, we can do custody relations and centralized exchange relations, and then provide those to the rest of the ecosystem to grow the ecosystem, and to take like not a value extractive approach to the ecosystem, but a value creative approach, right? So that when people think about Cosmos and the Cosmos Hub and they start with Atom, they can then feel good about going outside. There shouldn't be this combative energy. Like, the Cosmos Hub was built by the people who made Cosmos and the Cosmos stack, right? It was part of the original vision. It's in the white paper. It's a service offering just like the stack to grow Cosmos. And I think that's a paradigm shift that people need to think about, that the Cosmos Hub is not an enemy, right? And we're going to be building it, and we're not going to build it to be an enemy. We're going to build it to be a great accelerator for other chains and for its own, obviously, community, right? But I view these things a lot more united and a lot more cohesive than I think they've turned out to be. And I do agree with your point that it's hard for people to feel good about the Cosmos Hub when it doesn't perform hub-like activities.
Yeah, completely agree. And I would say, the one of the strengths that Mag brought up earlier about the hub is the fact that it's survived, and it's been for so long, and that despite all of the challenges that that the ecosystem has faced on the social layer, all the challenges that the ICF has faced, internally, all the challenges that other proponents of or builders have faced, that the hub has stuck around, and not just stuck around. It has been relevant and still part of that broader conversation for Cosmos, despite all of those challenges. And I think that the mode shift is exactly what Mag talked about, which is that we need to re-embrace it as being a central part of the Cosmos ecosystem, and effectively meeting that narrative of the hub is a hub, right? Making that nominative determinism turn out to be true. I think in this case is really the goal.
I think just one last point on that, which is I think people need to really internalize, and this is true, that attacking the hub is like attacking yourself, right? And that trying to distance or deny either Cosmos or the Cosmos Hub when you're using the technology and you're built within the vision is ultimately hurting yourself. Because either you end up as, first of all, people see through that, right? And people know that you're either using Cosmos technology or that you are in the ecosystem, and they think you're denying it, which makes people think that, oh, like, what are you hiding? Or when people look at your technology stack and they see Cosmos there or they see Comet, then they immediately think of the Cosmos Hub, right? And sort of the institutions that are funding that technology and building that technology and maintaining it, aka us, right? The team behind all of this and the ICF. If you're disparaging those people, you're really disparaging the creators of your own software, right? That is running your chain. And that is why, like, I really, like, I want people to internalize and I want chain founders to believe that these things are not zero sum. Like, by supporting the Cosmos Hub, by supporting the Cosmos vision, you are supporting yourself and you're supporting what you're built on if you're in this ecosystem, right? I think that's a really important message. And I think, honestly, something that a lot of people are now, it's clicking for them.
So speaking of the ecosystem, there are, I've talked about this with folks for the last couple of years, and even recently on like an episode I did with Sunny at Cosmoverse about the Cosmos branding problem. This is something that we've faced as a fund over the last 2 years of fundraising, where investors see us, perhaps rightly, as a fund that invests primarily in Cosmos or Cosmos adjacent things, and certainly we've done a lot of investments in the space. And for some, the reaction to that has changed, I think, over the last 2 years. In the beginning, people were excited about it. I think like Cosmos still had a lot of positive brand equity, even months after the Terra collapse. Then over time, it became a little bit more of a stain, where folks would sort of question our investment in Cosmos, and then we sort of have ways to sort of justify our thesis by, like you were saying earlier, right? It is the correct architecture. It is the innovation hub for crypto. It provides some of the most advanced or stable and production-ready technology in the space, and people get that, right? But there is this branding problem. There is this this I think because the hub hasn't performed as well as people think it has or it should have. Cosmos as a brand has suffered, and the entire ecosystem, I think, has suffered. And some of the proposals or things that I've talked about with folks that is like, why don't we rebrand the ecosystem to Interchain? And that allows people to associate with the stack, with the tech, with the interoperability of IBC. And I think also really aligns with the earlier vision of the Interchain, right? Which was to have this internet of blockchains. And I've kind of agreed with that over the years and thought that, the hub should continue to be called the Cosmos Hub. The stack should continue to be called the Cosmos Stack. But as an ecosystem, we should make an effort to rebrand as the Interchain. And that would perhaps allow us to reel in a lot of the projects that have distanced themselves with the brand, that have kind of actively sought to build with the tech but not be a part of the ecosystem. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and kind of what you see as the best path forward for the ecosystem and for alignment, if you will. If you want to borrow a term here from Ethereum, I mean, how do we get Cosmos alignment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts, and I think it's funny for me to talk about this specifically because I was on this train for a while. Back in Skip days, I think I posted this thing of we should like reconsider the or cancel the Cosmos brand. So a couple thoughts. The first one is, generally, if you want to really win, you need a good narrative, right? And the strongest narrative in history, basically, is the comeback narrative. It's not the, oh, we were losing and so now we're this. Like, that doesn't really work with people because that isn't genuine. I think when people see someone own something and be like, we're unashamedly this, right? And this is great. And in this case, this is true. And that can be successful. That is a much more exciting story, right? Like, I love Cosmos not because like I'm not angry at Cosmos, right? I just think it's a huge opportunity and like I want to see it be successful. I think a lot of people actually believe this about Cosmos, right? And we're just saying Cosmos over and over again. I think if you were to rename it Interchain, you're sort of giving up, right? You're giving up on this vision. I kind of think of it like, if Solana, after all of the terrible things that happened back in 2022, renamed to, Fast Chain. Like, I think it's just like, you're not really setting yourself up for actually like building an identity and an identity that has a good story. And at the end of the day, when we all look back at our lives and our careers, what we remember are the stories, right? And this is the beginning of our story, right? I mean, we've already had a lot of chapters of the story, but like the story is the Cosmos story. It's not the Interchain story, right? Interchain is a great description of what Cosmos is. It is an internet of blockchains, interchain. And that is totally something that I think is part of the vision. But I think ultimately I plan on owning Cosmos. I definitely plan on investing in that brand. I definitely plan on owning Atom and investing in that brand and owning sort of the all the core pieces of what we stand for and investing in that and communicating that. I think a lot of it was just there was no real comms arm for these ideas, right? No real entity that felt incentivized to push forward these ideas because in Cosmos, as we know, if you left all the marketing of Solana up to the individual smart contracts, they would just be shelling their own things, right? They wouldn't be pushing forward these ideas. So I think now that we have a very well-funded, core foundation pushing these things forward, I think a lot of that will change. The last thing I just want to say on that quickly is I just think also that the narrative is a little bit misleading, that like Cosmos is bearish. Like, what are the things that investors are excited about right now? Babylon, right? Barachain, Initia, right? A lot of the things that we're excited about and that are raising the largest rounds in crypto are Cosmos-based L1s, right? That are, whether they like it or not, fitting into the original vision of Cosmos, which was an interconnected set of blockchains. And I think it just shows that like it's really a branding issue. It's not a vision or architecture issue. And I'd much rather have a branding issue because we can solve that, right? That requires like a branding agency and like marketing, right? And a good events that people like to go to. Like these are all doable things.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. And, certainly that's part of the narrative, right? Like one of the things I've had to remind people of is that all the frontier chains in the ecosystem are building using Cosmos Stack, whether that's, Celestia, Barachain, DYTX, like you name it. The most exciting stuff happening is happening on Cosmos, on Cosmos Tech now. That the alignment with the brand I think has been difficult, but let's do it, man. Let's realign. Let's realign Cosmos.
Yeah, and
yay for the underdog.
yeah, and I think to that point, to add to Meg's great response on that, being part of a comeback story and being aligned with that comeback is one of the things, in addition to actually serving the needs of all of these other chains that are building using the Cosmos stack. But those things combined are going to bolster and bring more people together, right? So like the fact that some of these folks are post acquisition getting excited about being part of the Cosmos again is just going to contribute to that positive momentum to reestablish the brand as being one of the top brands in the ecosystem more broadly, So I'm very optimistic about that as well, and completely agree that if we had rebranded to Sovereign Stack or something, it just wouldn't have the same ring to it, and it would look like we're hiding our history as opposed to just embracing it warts and all and demonstrating that we can do better.
Yeah, and I think the history I'm not ashamed of, right? We built a truly decentralized ecosystem. When you build something that's truly decentralized, no one controls it, and so everyone is arguing. That's right. That's how it works. Like that was the outcome of the design, right? And it was beautiful in that. Now I think we're finding a better balance between sort of like full decentralization on the social layer and on the architectural layer. But that was a reality of that architecture. Look at Ethereum right now, right? Look at all of the infighting that's going on. Max Resnick being pushed out. This North Star vision. Is it a world computer? Is ETH money? This is the result of a decentralized ecosystem, right? Like, this is how it works. And I think it's fun, right? Like, you can really get involved. Of course, like, drama is sometimes annoying, right? But I think we're going to see a lot less of that, is my hope. I kind of feel like, if you go back to like the last World Cup, like, do you want to be a supporter of France, or do you want to be a supporter of Morocco, right? Morocco made it so far towards the end, and their supporters were wild. It changed the country's like status, right? Like, that is a much more exciting team to be a part of, I think, than like just supporting the winner of the week.
Well, I live in France and have French, so I was supporting France. But I get your point. Cool. So I want to come back to the ICF in just a second, but before I want to ask one thing here is, all ecosystems that are well run and have a well run and well oiled foundation and development arm and business development run a conference. And so, the ICF hasn't run a conference since 2018 or it was 2019, maybe 2019, in Berlin. Can people expect another Cosmos conference run by the ICF at some point?
All right. We can expect more conferences, whether they are ICF branded. Sorry, I'm not entirely sure, but definitely at Interchain Labs, we are committed to basically, we're already working with Cito and Seb, you should get involved. Like, we want to throw a much better conference. I think there's a number of learnings we had from Cosmoverse, which I would argue was actually a really good conference, especially given the resources that it was
absolutely
given. We can do a lot more now, and we can have a lot more fun. And we really can focus these conferences on builders and making sure the message is getting across in the right way. And also, there's a couple like quality of life things. Like, these conferences should be, I think, closer to other conferences. Not so, far away, although it is fun to travel, that's not accessible for a lot of people. And there should be more of them, right? Like, one time a year is probably not enough to accommodate a very fast moving, and we do intend the future of Cosmos to be very fast moving, narrative and series of like developments. So the pace of that, I think, needs to go up.
Yeah. And I would say, just on, the ICF side, we're very open to potentially doing that, in the future. But just to be candid, we don't have that core competency at the foundation right now, right? To be the main organizer or of a conference. But to Mac's point, the prospect of supporting folks that are making more frequent conferences and then doing them, doing maybe more with less that way is something that we would absolutely be open to. And something that I've now been working remotely for quite some time, and it's amazing to be able to do it and live wherever and do whatever. But honestly, some of the like greatest periods of progress are when you get a bunch of people together that in real space, as much as and so the more that we can do that, I think the better we'll serve the ecosystem at large.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, organizing events is hard. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and it's still not a core competency. So I understand that maybe sort of this approach of supporting folks in the space that are organizing events at the same time organizing your own allows us to have just more events and more diverse events, and I think that's probably the best path forward to maintain a little bit of decentralization, at least in the conference space, because we need more conferences than just one, right? We need more than 3. We need maybe 5. And I'm looking forward to more of those. So coming back to the ICF a little bit, you mentioned earlier that there had been some pretty significant change on the board level in the last year. There's been some whispers about that the board expanding to have even more members, and I think that's a change that I'm bullish about. But broadly, can you talk a little bit about the ICF and how the organization will evolve over the next little while, and is the scope of the ICF going to be any different? And maybe just, for context here, like, what is actually the scope of the ICF, and between the ICF and Interchain Labs, like, how are responsibilities shared, and how will you be sort of interacting with each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to answer the first part of that first, yes, the board is expanding. We had a previous process where we had a lot of great candidates come through that we're modifying a bit, but you'll be hearing news about a new board member soon, I suspect. Because obviously with Bucky resigning, we need to definitely fill that immediate spot. But our intent is to still fill out and have a 5-person board, which is I think the right balance between you don't want a giant community of people, but you do need other perspectives and sound governance at that level, and having more people there will get us there. So, but you'll hear more about that going forward. On the actual scoping of what the ICF does versus what Interchain Labs does, I spoke a little bit about this previously, but Interchain Labs is now, we're consolidating development effort, product strategy, hub work, all in Interchain Labs, and that's going to be on them, and we're going to be funding them to do that work going forward. For the Interchain Foundation, we still have this broad mission of supporting the cosmos and the interchain, and the more connected blockchains, the better. The more self-sovereign blockchain applications, the better. We're on that level. We're still going to be involved with doing grant making, venture funding. Maybe not immediately on the venture funding side, but that's something that's still going to be a big activity, and we're going to make sure that all of that is lined up with the work that Interchain Labs is doing. And as Magus said previously, we all have the same vision at the lab side and the ICF side. We're all very aligned on where we want to go. So there will be a great degree of coordination between those activities on the ICF side and on the lab side.
Yeah, I think to add to that, there are definitely things that are majorly changing. So a lot of what we're doing here, and as part of this acquisition, is that we are moving the development closer to the ICF so that we can have this very coordinated go-to-market for how we're building things in unison. The way that it worked previously was the ICF would fund external teams, and a multitude of them. This is the team of teams model to do core development. So, for example, SDK development was contracted out to binary builders, and IBC development, or at least part of it for the relayer, was contracted out to Strangelove, and Cosm Wasm development was contracted out to Confia. We are ending this and reversing it. So now we are maintaining all of these core pieces of software, and the ICF is funding us to do that directly, right? Versus just being another team of team. We are fully owned by the ICF, right? We are literally a subsidiary, an operational subsidiary. And the idea behind that is, one, development works better when you have integrated pieces, when you're doing it in one place and you're all in person. It's very difficult to coordinate between different teams that are all separated as their own companies trying to make their own profit margins. And two, I just want to say, those teams did an excellent job, but it's going to be very hard to drive at the speed that we want to drive if we can't all be in the same room going towards the same goal. And we're serving really one customer, which is Cosmos, versus, being distracted by a bunch of different things. So those are some of the major changes. I think also we plan to absorb some of the functions of what we've seen deploy in the Cosmos Hub as community efforts. into Interchain Labs in the ICF. So, AA DAO, I believe is ending. We are going to have an excellent replacement for that we are going to, spend a lot of attention to, where we invite builders in to be incubated at Interchain Labs directly, sitting next to us, that we can provide hands-on help to, venture funding with venture partners, and really make sure that, there's an end-to-end pipeline there to get people in the door and then also get them deployed in the ecosystem.
That sounds great, man. I'm so bullish on this news, and I think that bringing everything under one roof is going to accelerate. I mean, it's not just the tangible acceleration of how, like all the different pieces fit together, but I think that it will have compounding effects that we don't yet understand, and will become evident pretty soon, I hope. So yeah, address the community. I'd say at this point, I'd like to invite you to address the community, and maybe as we wrap up here is, why like, for people who are not as bullish, or maybe are still skeptical about this, if there is anybody out there that's still skeptical, why should the community be bullish?
Josh, want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first and foremost is that we listened. The community made an impact. They said that things were not, going as well as they could be at the ICF, and we were not stuck in an ivory tower, just, hands over our ears, rocking back and forth in a fetal position. I did that a little bit, but, I got through it. And
as an atom holder, I've also done this.
But that I think is the biggest signal that we're open to change, we're open to radical change, and that we recognize where our weaknesses were as an organization, and we resolved to fix it. And it was not an easy path to do it, but we did it. And there's a huge journey ahead of us here. But I think the fact that we made that step, which I think people would say is a first of its kind, not just in the cosmos, but broadly speaking, I think in the industry, for the decision that we've made. I think that should make people feel very optimistic about the future. And then one thing, I know we didn't talk about it a bit, is, as you said, Seb, I'm a bit of a new face in the Cosmos ecosystem, but I've been in the cryptocurrency world for a very long time. I'm a big believer in privacy and privacy advocate. I was previously executive director of the Zcash Foundation. And one of the things to me that was very exciting about that work is like, there's technology available for us to be able to make people have more privacy, that I think is something that's fundamental to the operation of any financial system at all. But it's been clear to me, and I have some bias here because I've invested in Penumbra. But it's clear to me that that the best privacy projects are here in the Cosmos too. And by us having this trailblazing course where we're saying we can fix so much of what's these core governance issues and actually consolidate development effort and improve this for everyone, is going to make those privacy projects much more valuable to the world at large. And I don't mean economically, I mean morally, right? Like there's going to be an actual opportunity to use these projects to create more private economic systems, of which the hub and all these other chains will be a part of it. And that, to me, that's my personal hobby horse, but also makes me incredibly personally excited about where we're going. And I'll leave it to you, Mag.
No, I love that. That's great. And I mean, there are some things that are only possible in Cosmos, right? And some of those things are the things that we absolutely need in the world, right? Privacy technology, fully sovereign blockchains, or fully sovereign blockchains that are private, that you can only make private by customizing your infrastructure in the way that Cosmos allows. I would say, when I talk to the community, I see a lot of people who believe in the vision and in what we're trying to do. I also believe, and so in that way, I really empathize. I think really what we're going to see now, and the reality of how we've restructured things, is Cosmos with like the shackles off. right? Like we've been walking around sort of like with our feet shackled, and they're off now, right? Like there's really nothing stopping us from seeing how far this vision can go. And so if you believe in multiple blockchains and not just one blockchain, right? Which is ultimately the huge difference between Cosmos and everywhere else, where everyone else believes in one blockchain, right? Their blockchain, it's going to be theirs, right? If you believe in many and you believe in a world where there is a lot more differentiated architecture and sovereignty, and you believe that that can be successful, and that is the way to build the permissionless, decentralized Web3 or new internet that we believe it can be in the way that I believe it should be, this is the time to sort of be invested, because now we have no restrictions. And we're going to push that to its absolute limit and see how far we can go.
Let's do it. LFG. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on, and very excited about what's to come for Cosmos. I think it's been a long time since I felt so bullish about the Cosmos ecosystem. And when I learned about this news, I was like, this is what we need. And this is what is going to really propel this ecosystem forward to being like a top 10, top 5 ecosystem in the space. So thank you, and have a great Christmas. Happy holidays.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks.